You already know goats are weird. You've seen the videos, the screaming, the fainting, the climbing, but that's not even close to the full story. There is a goat in the world right now whose milk contains spider silk stronger than Kevlar. There is a goat breed that won a beauty pageant in Saudi Arabia, despite the internet naming it the ugliest animal alive. There is a goat so tiny it holds the Guinness World Record for richest milk of any dairy animal on Earth, and it fits in your lap while it does it. There is a breed with corkscrew horns that were carved in stone 4,000 years ago, and fewer than 500 of them exist today. These are 20 goat breeds with the most surprising abilities, strangest traits, and most jaw-dropping stories we could find. And the further you get into this list, the harder the things are to believe. Number 20, the Nigerian dwarf, the Guinness record holder. Nobody expects. This is the smallest dairy goat in the world. A fully grown Nigerian dwarf stands about 17 inches tall, weighs under 80 pounds, and fits in the back seat of a car with room to spare. Now here is the part that should not make sense. This tiny animal holds an official Guinness World Record for the highest butterfat content of any dairy goat breed on Earth. Their milk runs at 6.5% butterfat on average. During peak lactation, it can hit 10%, sometimes higher. For comparison, a standard dairy cow sits around 3 to 4%. A full-sized Saanen goat, one of the most prolific milk producers in the world, averages around 3%. The Nigerian dwarf is producing milk that is nearly 3 times richer, from a body that would get lost under a dairy cow. 1 quart of their milk makes more cheese than 2 quarts of milk from a larger breed, because of the fat yield. They came from West Africa, arrived in American zoos in the 1930s as exhibit animals, and were not formally registered as a dairy breed until 2005. Within 8 years of that recognition, nearly 40,000 were registered in the United States alone. The only catch, their teats are tiny. Getting the milk out requires patience, but what's inside is extraordinary for something that weighs less than a medium-sized dog. Number 19, the Angora, the goat that was treated like state property. The word mohair comes from Arabic. It means, roughly, cloth of bright and lustrous goat hair. That tells you something about how long this fiber has been worth talking about. References to fleece-producing goats in the Angora region of Turkey appear in Sumerian cuneiform tablets from the 14th century BC. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire treated the Angora goat like a national treasure. The Sultan placed a strict embargo on exporting the animals or their raw fleece. Finished mohair could leave the country, the goats and their wool could not. When a group of 12 bucks and 1 doe were finally shipped to South Africa in 1838, after the embargo was partially lifted, the Turks had secretly castrated all the males to prevent anyone else from building a breeding herd. The 1 pregnant doe they sent saved the industry. Her male kid became the foundation sire for South African mohair production. Turkey had over 6 million Angora goats in 1960. By the early 2000s, that number had dropped to around 150,000, a 97% collapse in the breed's home country. South Africa is now the largest producer. The United States is second, with 90% of American mohair concentrated in Texas. 1 Angora produces about 10 pounds of mohair a year, shorn twice. The fiber from young kids is the softest and most prized. They do not faint. They do not scream. They just grow something that looks like silk and feels like a cloud. Number 18, the Valais blackneck, the goat that looks painted. Most animals have gradients, patches, or spots. The Valais blackneck has a hard, clean line drawn across the middle of its body, nose to just behind the shoulder. Solid black, shoulder to tail, solid white. No blending, no variation. A precise 2-tone coat down to the hooves, covering even the long, wavy leg hair. They live in the Swiss Alps, specifically in the canton of Valais, where their ancestors may have arrived with African or Arab migrants around 930 AD. They are adapted to high altitude, steep terrain, and brutal alpine conditions. They can graze up to 3,000 meters above sea level. In the late 1960s, their total population fell below 200 animals before a conservation program rescued the breed. Stabilized at around 3,300 animals by the early 2000s, they remain endangered. In Italy, there are fewer than 500. In Germany, under 500. What makes this more interesting is that in 2021, conservationists discovered the Valais blackneck was actually 4 separate breeds: a copper-necked variant, a gray-necked variant, and a pure white variant called the Simplon goat, had all existed alongside the black version for centuries, but were officially excluded from recognition in 1938, when the breed standard only accepted black. The others kept existing in tiny pockets, The Swiss conservation group Pro Specie Rara found them, sequenced them, and had all four formally recognized. The breed most people know as the panda goat was, all along, one quarter of a larger family that nearly vanished without anyone noticing. Number 17. The LaMancha, America's only native goat breed, built by one woman with no ears. Of the hundreds of recognized goat breeds in the world, only one was developed in the United States. And its most defining trait is that it appears to have no ears. LaMancha goats do have ears, they are just very small. There are two official types, gopher ears, which are essentially non-existent, and elf ears, which max out at 2 inches. When you look at a LaMancha face straight on, it has a smooth, almost reptilian appearance around the sides of the head where ears should be. Breeders say people see them and assume the goats are sick, or that something went wrong. Nothing went wrong. This is the standard. A single woman named Eula Fay Fry built this breed. In 1937, she bought a California farm with 2 short-eared goats. The doe was small but produced an improbable amount of milk. Frey bred her son to an Alpine Nubian cross, kept the daughter, and spent the next 20 years selectively breeding toward a consistent type, crossing in Nubians, Toggenburgs, French Alpines, Oberhasli, and a Spanish breed called the Mercian. She moved her herd to Oregon, stopped outside genetics in 1957, and bred LaMancha to LaMancha only. In 1958, the breed was formally registered, with around 200 foundation animals accepted. The American Milk Goat Record Association gave her its highest award in 1960. The earless trait is dominant and inherited reliably. A LaMancha buck with gopher ears will pass the trait to nearly every offspring. The breed is now present in 41 states and is among the most popular dairy goats in North America. References to short-eared goats appear in ancient Persian records. Short-eared goats were displayed at the 1904 World's Fair in Paris, but no registered breed with ears this small had ever existed before Eula Fay Fry created one. Number 16. The Girgentana, the ancient Sicilian goat with corkscrew horns and 500 left. In the 1920s and 1930s, farmers in Agrigento, Sicily, would walk through city neighborhoods with their Girgentana goats and knock on doors. Customers would come out, a goat would be milked right on the street, and the fresh milk would be handed over on the spot. Hygiene laws ended the practice. The breed never recovered. There were 30,000 Girgentana in Sicily in the 1950s. By the early 2000s, there were around 500 left. The FAO classified them as endangered in 2007. Slow Food has them on their Presidium list, which designates food-producing breeds and products at risk of disappearing. The farmers keeping them are mostly elderly. Their most arresting feature is their horns. Both males and females carry tall, spiraling corkscrew horns that rise almost vertically from the skull and twist a full turn upward. Male horns reach up to 70 centimeters. They bear a passing resemblance to the wild Markhor of Central Asia, which was proposed as an ancestor, though the direction of the spiral is opposite, and their true origin, whether Greek colonists brought them around 700 BC or Arab invaders in the 9th century AD, remains unresolved. Their connection to the ram in a thicket statues excavated from ancient Ur in 1927 was proposed by a German zoologist in the 1930s. Whether that connection holds or not, this is a goat breed that has been in the same corner of Sicily for a very long time, with a face you would not forget, and almost no one left to keep it alive. Number 15. The Damascus goat, the ugliest animal on the internet that won a beauty pageant. Let us establish 2 facts about the Damascus goat. Fact 1. The internet has repeatedly listed this breed among the world's ugliest animals. They have bulging foreheads, jutting underbites, protruding noses, long pendulous ears, and an overall appearance that one writer described as what you would get if you typed Renaissance-era nightmare goat into an AI image generator. Fact 2. In June 2008, at the Mazayan Almaz competition in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a Damascus goat named Kar was awarded first place in the Most Beautiful Goat category. The winning animal was purchased for 150,000 Saudi riyals, which at the time was approximately 40,000 US dollars. Both of these facts are true simultaneously. Beauty, apparently, is entirely a matter of perspective. What makes the Damascus even stranger is the transformation. Baby Damascus goats are genuinely cute. They have enormous floppy ears that dwarf their little faces, curious eyes, and soft coats. As they age, the features that looked proportionally charming begin to exaggerate. The forehead pushes forward, the nose flattens out, the underbite develops. The animal that appeared adorable at 8 weeks looks like something from a different creature entirely by adulthood. They originated in Syria, where they have been raised for milk and meat for centuries. The breed was introduced to Cyprus by the British in the 19th century and selectively refined there, with the more exaggerated facial features likely amplified through deliberate breeding for show competition. A purebred Damascus currently costs between $5,000 and $8,000 in the United States, if you can find one. Show specimens have sold for multiples of that. 50% of Damascus births are twins. Their milk is high in butterfat and protein, easily digestible, and prized for cheese production across the Middle East. They are, despite appearances, one of the most productive dual-purpose breeds in the world. The FAO has flagged them as a priority breed for exactly that reason. Number 14. The Markhor, the national animal that may have fathered all goats. The Markhor is Pakistan's national animal. It lives at elevations of up to 12,000 feet in the Karakoram and Himalayas. Its name comes from the Persian words for snake and eater, because ancient folklore held that it hunted and killed serpents with its horns. There is no scientific evidence this is true. The cud it chews does produce a foam-like substance that falls to the ground and dries, which villagers traditionally collected and used to draw out snake venom from bites. Whether this works is a separate question. The horns are the thing. Both males and females carry corkscrew-shaped horns that tighten upward like a drill bit. Male horns reach up to 160 centimeters, over 5 feet, and are among the most dramatic horns of any animal on Earth. In the 1990s, their population had fallen to around 2,500 animals across their entire range. Trophy hunting had decimated them. Poaching continued. A community-based conservation program that gave local villages a percentage of regulated hunting fees turned the trajectory around. By 2015, the IUCN downgraded their status from endangered to near threatened. Current estimates put the global population above 5,000. Charles Darwin suggested in the 19th century that the domestic goat descended from the Markhor through crossbreeding with wild goats. Modern research has found that Markhor may have contributed genetics to several domestic breeds, including the Angora, the Girgentana, and the Changthangi of Ladakh. Whether Darwin was right in the way he framed it, the Markhor stands somewhere near the origin of the entire lineage of animals that humans have been keeping, milking, and raising for meat for 10,000 years. Number 13. The Toggenburg, the oldest registered breed of any dairy animal in the world. The Toggenburg has records dating to the 17th century in the Swiss canton of Toggenburg. That makes it the oldest registered dairy goat breed in the world, and one of the oldest registered breeds of any dairy animal. They were exported from Switzerland in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and became foundational to dairy goat programs across Europe and North America. Hardy, suited to cold and wet climates, consistent long lactation milk producers, they have been selectively bred for over 400 years, one of the longest continuous breeding programs for any dairy animal in recorded history. Number 12. The fainting goat. It doesn't faint, and nobody knows where it came from. In the early 1880s, a man named John Tinsley arrived in Marshall County, Tennessee, with 4 unusual goats. Nobody knows where Tinsley came from. Accounts say he was reputedly from Nova Scotia, but records are thin. He sold the goats and their offspring to a local doctor named Mayberry, and moved on. That is the entire documented origin story of a breed that now has its own national celebration in Lewisburg, Tennessee every year. The goats did not actually faint. They still do not faint. What happens is a genetic condition called myotonia congenita, caused by a single letter change in the CLCN1 gene. When the goat is startled or excited, its muscle cells fire rapidly, but the chloride channels that allow them to relax are defective. The result is a full-body muscle lock, a Charlie horse in every limb simultaneously, lasting 5 to 20 seconds. Some goats fall over. Some just stiffen and stand there looking rigid. The goat remains completely conscious throughout. It is not painful. The mutation was first described in scientific literature in 1904. The gene responsible was identified in 1996. The condition exists in humans as well, where it causes muscle stiffness, but notably does not trigger in response to fear the way it does in goats. Why goats freeze and humans do not is still not entirely understood. Because they cannot jump or climb well, fainting goats are easier to fence than almost any other breed. Farmers in early Tennessee kept them alongside expensive livestock for another reason. When a wolf or predator attacked, the goat would freeze and become easy prey, giving the rest of the herd time to flee. Some accounts describe this as an intentional practice. Whether true or not, by the 1950s the breed had spread to Texas, where they were selected for meat production. Their myotonia causes constant involuntary muscle contraction that effectively gives them the benefits of a permanent workout, resulting in a meat-to-bone ratio of 4:1, compared to 3:1 in other breeds. Their origin is still a mystery. The CLCN1 mutation appears not to have arisen anywhere else, which suggests it emerged once, in one animal, sometime before the 1880s, somewhere unknown. Number 11. The Arapawa goat, the Faroe Island survivor from the 1600s. Off the northeast coast of New Zealand's South Island sits Arapawa Island. It has no permanent human population, and no introduced predators. For roughly 400 years, a small population of goats has lived there in complete isolation. The theory is that European explorers, possibly including Captain Cook on his voyages in the 1770s, left goats on the island as a food source for future sailors. The animals that remained interbred and adapted to the island's dense forest environment over generations. By the time European settlers paid serious attention to them in the 19th century, they were distinct enough that researchers noticed. When the New Zealand Forest Service determined in the 20th century that the goats were damaging native vegetation, they began a culling program. By the time local activists intervened, Arapawa goat numbers had dropped drastically. A sanctuary was established on the island in 1897. In the 1990s, Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts imported a small herd to the United States for conservation. The American population remains between 150 and 200 registered animals. The Livestock Conservancy lists them as critical. Genetic analysis suggests they carry Old English goat genetics, not found in other breeds. A genetic snapshot of a type of goat that existed in Britain in the 1600s, but has since been bred out or replaced everywhere else on Earth. The Arapawa may be the last living example of an otherwise extinct lineage, preserved by 400 years of island isolation, while the original population vanished from its home country. Number 10. The Kashmir goat, the animal behind the world's most expensive fiber, has no official breed. Here is something strange. Kashmir does not come from a breed. It comes from a trait. Any goat that grows a fine enough undercoat, defined as fibers under 19 microns in diameter, can be classified as a Kashmir goat. The Changthangi of Ladakh, the Hexi Kashmir of China, the Kashmir goat of New Zealand. These are all different animals that produce the same type of fiber, selected over centuries in different parts of Asia. The fiber itself is the secondary growth that most goats produce for warmth in winter, then shed in spring. It sits under the coarser outer guard hairs and has to be combed or collected during the spring molt. A single goat produces between 100 and 200 grams per year. A cashmere sweater requires about 200 to 400 grams of fiber. That means one sweater represents a full year of fiber from 2 to 4 animals. The finest cashmere comes from the Changthangi of the Ladakh Plateau in Tibet, at 14,000 feet or above. The extreme cold forces production of a thinner, softer undercoat than any lower elevation can match. The Changthangi may carry Markhor genetics, placing it among the oldest fiber-producing lineages on Earth. The global cashmere market is worth billions of dollars and is built entirely on a secondary undercoat that goats would otherwise leave on rocks when spring comes. Number 9. The Golden Guernsey, the only golden goat, nearly exterminated by a world war. The Golden Guernsey is the only breed of goat in the world with a coat that ranges from pale champagne blonde to deep burnished gold. It is small, finely built, distinctly golden, and exists today only because one woman refused to let it disappear during the German occupation of the Channel Islands in World War II. Miriam Milburn kept and hid a small herd of Golden Guernsey goats throughout the occupation. When the war ended and access to the islands was restored, her animals formed the core of the breed's revival. Without her, the Golden Guernsey almost certainly would have been lost entirely during the occupation years. When the breed was finally introduced to the United States in 1999, it arrived nearly a century after it had been developed, and nearly half a century after a single person had saved it from wartime extinction. Their milk is mild, low in the compounds that cause the typical goat flavor, and high in butterfat relative to their small size. The Guernsey Goat Breeders of America has worked to build the American population largely through importing semen, because live animal imports face strict health regulations. They were listed as endangered for decades. As of 2020, the Rare Breeds Survival Trust in the UK upgraded their status to minority, still small, but no longer at immediate risk. It is the goat equivalent of a golden retriever, except far rarer, found mostly on a small island off the coast of England, and nearly wiped out by the events of 1940. Number 8. The Kiko, the goat bred to never need a vet. In the 1970s and 1980s, a New Zealand farmer named Garrick Batten had a problem. He was raising feral goats alongside purebred dairy breeds on challenging terrain, and the purebred animals kept getting sick, picking up parasites, and dying. The feral animals, descended from goats released by European settlers, survived everything the farm could throw at them without any intervention. Batten began an intentional breeding program. He crossed feral New Zealand does with Nubian and Boer bucks, selected for size and growth rate. He kept only animals that survived without veterinary intervention, without deworming, and without supplemental feed. Animals that needed help were culled. What emerged after several generations was the Kiko, from the Maori word for meat. The Kiko's most remarkable trait is not something you can see, it is parasite resistance. Barber's poleworm, Haemonchus contortus, is the most deadly internal parasite affecting goats worldwide, and it has developed resistance to many common dewormers in commercial herds. Kikos carry a natural resistance that other breeds lack. University research in the United States, where the breed was exported in the 1990s, confirmed that Kikos maintain healthy blood values under parasite challenge without chemical treatment, at rates significantly higher than Boer or Spanish goats. Batten's program was not scientifically designed from the beginning. It was pragmatic selection by a farmer who was tired of losing animals. The result was a breed that altered how American producers think about sustainable meat goat production. A breed that was built deliberately to survive without human intervention. Number 7. The Bagot goat, the semi-wild goat, given to a king in 1380. In 1380, King Richard II of England received a gift, a Valais blackneck goat from Switzerland. The animal was placed in the deer park at Blythefield Hall in Staffordshire. At some point, it was left to roam. Successive generations were never fully domesticated again. For roughly 600 years, through the Wars of the Roses, through the English Civil War, through 2 world wars, a population of goats lived semi-wild in the grounds of Blythefield Hall. Nobody managed them. Nobody herded them. They bred as they chose, wintered in the park, and were observed but largely left alone. They became associated with the Bagot family, who owned the estate. By the 1980s, the herd had grown too large for the estate to support, and most of the animals were culled. The survivors were dispersed to conservation herds and wildlife parks. The Rare Breeds Survival Trust put them on their critical list. The current population is tiny, a few hundred animals across the UK. What the Bagot goat preserves is a genetic line that has been shaped by 6 centuries of semi-wild living rather than selective breeding for production. Their coats retain the distinctive 2-tone pattern of their Valais ancestors. Their temperament is wilder than most domestic breeds. They are living evidence that one animal given to an English king in 1380, and then largely forgotten, can survive for more than 600 years if left mostly alone. Number 6. The Nubian, the loudest goat in the world, has Roman roots. Anglo-Nubian goats, known in the United States simply as Nubians, are immediately recognizable by 2 features: the long, pendulous ears that hang well below the jaw, and the Roman nose with its dramatic convex profile. They are also, by near universal consensus among goat keepers, extremely vocal. Their ancestors were goats from North Africa and India, long-eared breeds with tolerance for heat, a naturally strong voice, and high butterfat milk, crossed with British goats in the late 19th century. The resulting breed combined the pendulous ears, Roman nose, and vocal tendencies of the African and Indian animals, with the dairy capacity and size of the British breeds. Nubian milk averages around 5% butterfat, the highest of any full-size dairy goat breed. It is richer, creamier, and less goaty flavored than milk from Swiss breeds, making it popular for artisan cheese production. The screaming is not an exaggeration. Nubians vocalize when hungry, when separated from herdmates, or when they simply feel like communicating. Neighbors of Nubian farms sometimes call emergency services, certain they're hearing a human in distress. Goat keepers describe it as charming and exhausting in equal measure. And despite the noise, Nubians remain among the most popular dairy breeds in the United States. Number 5. The Ibex, the wild goat that climbs vertical rock, faces to lick salt. The Alpine Ibex is technically a wild goat, not a domestic breed, but it is a goat, and what it can do with its body should not be physically possible. The Cingino Dam in northern Italy is a concrete gravity dam in the Piedmont Alps. Its downstream face is nearly vertical, a 60-degree slope for most of its height, and steeper near the top. On this face, Alpine Ibex can be found grazing, not beside the dam, not on top of it, on the face itself, clinging to the textured concrete surface to lick the algae and mineral salts that accumulate there. They do this because their hooves have a hard outer edge for gripping, and a soft, rubbery inner pad for traction, a built-in climbing shoe. Their dew claws act as additional contact points on near-vertical surfaces. Their center of gravity and leg structure allow them to distribute weight across all four hooves in ways other ungulates cannot. The Nubian ibex of the Middle East and North Africa creates an additional biological wonder: communal nurseries. Female ibex leave their kids in clusters on the most inaccessible ledges available, cliff faces that no predator can reach. These aggregations of kids are sometimes described as unintentional, with the young animals simply gathering where they're stuck. Others suggest the females choose ledges deliberately. Either way, ibex kids begin their lives in a natural fortress of vertical rock that kills anything without the genetics to survive it. The Alpine Ibex was hunted to near extinction by the 19th century. In 1821, fewer than 100 survived, all in one valley in Italy protected by the royal family of Sardinia. Conservation programs have rebuilt the population to roughly 30,000 in the Alps today. Number 4. The Boer, the largest goat breed in the world, built in South Africa. Male Boer goats reach 350 pounds. Females peak around 250. They were developed in South Africa's Eastern Cape in the early 20th century, bred for meat by selecting the largest, fastest-growing animals from indigenous Khoikhoi populations, crossed with European and Indian breeds. Before the Boer was developed, Spanish goats were widely considered the best meat goat in the world. The Boer rendered that judgment obsolete within a generation. They have a meat-to-bone ratio that outperforms virtually every competing breed. Their daily weight gain under good conditions is higher than nearly any other goat. Their heads are reddish-brown, their bodies white, and their build is unmistakably that of an animal designed around converting feed into muscle as efficiently as possible. They were introduced to the United States in 1993. Within a decade, they had transformed the American meat goat industry. They are now found in every U.S. state, every continent except Antarctica, and are the dominant commercial meat goat breed across much of the world. The animal did not exist as a formal breed before 1900. By 2000, it had reshaped global goat production. Number 3. The spider goat. The U.S. military funded a goat that produces spider silk in its milk. Spiders cannot be farmed. They are territorial and cannibalistic. Keep too many in one space, and they kill each other. This is a problem because spider silk is one of the most extraordinary materials on Earth, stronger than Kevlar by weight, more elastic, biocompatible, and potentially invaluable for bullet-resistant armor, artificial ligaments, surgical sutures, and aerospace applications. You need spiders to make it. You cannot farm spiders. In the 1990s, a Montreal-based biotech company named Nexia Biotechnologies, funded in part by the United States military, proposed a solution. They inserted genes from the golden orb weaver spider into goat embryos. The gene responsible for the dragline silk protein was placed under the same genetic control as the proteins found in goat milk, so it would only activate during lactation and only in the udder. The result, a goat that produces spider silk proteins in its milk. The first spider goats were named Sugar and Spice. Their milk looked like ordinary goat milk. It contained spider silk proteins that could be extracted, purified, and spun into fibers. Nexia trademarked the material as BioSteel. Their tests showed tensile strength 7 to 10 times that of high-grade steel by weight, with the ability to stretch up to 20 times its length without breaking. The military's interest was in lightweight body armor stronger than anything synthetically produced. Nexia went bankrupt in the early 2000s. Sugar and Spice were sold to the Canada Agriculture Museum, which eventually removed them from display after public pressure. The research was continued by Dr. Randy Lewis, first at the University of Wyoming and then at Utah State University, where a herd of around 30 spider goats has been maintained for over 2 decades. Each goat produces about 8 liters of milk per day, with roughly 2 grams of spider silk protein per liter, 16 grams per animal per day. The goats are otherwise completely normal. They eat the same food, behave the same, require the same care. The silk proteins appear in trace amounts in their sweat glands, tear ducts, and salivary glands, but cause no apparent health effects. In over 15 years of breeding, the researchers have documented no abnormal health outcomes. The goats simply carry a gene that does not belong to them, from an animal they will never meet, producing a material their bodies have no evolutionary reason to know about. Commercial production from goat milk has not yet reached industrial scale. Companies like Bolt Threads are now producing spider silk proteins through yeast fermentation without any goats. The spider goats at Utah State may one day be remembered as a transitional technology, But for now, they are the only animals in the world that produce spider silk in a dairy barn, milked 3 times a day by graduate students. Number 2. The Bezoar Ibex. This is not a breed, this is the breed. Or rather, it is the animal that all breeds came from. In 1997, genetic analysis confirmed that every domestic goat on Earth, all of the animals on this list, all 1 billion domestic goats currently alive, every goat that has ever given milk to a child, carried a load up a mountain, been kept as a companion, or produced fiber for clothing, descends from the Bezoar Ibex, a wild goat native to the Zagros Mountains of modern-day Iran and the surrounding region. Domestication happened once, or possibly in a small number of closely related events, approximately 10,000 years ago. The people of the Neolithic Near East were the first to bring wild Bezoar Ibex into managed herds. From that single domestication event, goats spread across every inhabited continent, adapted to deserts, tundra, tropical forests, and alpine terrain, and diversified into hundreds of breeds shaped by the specific needs of the humans keeping them. Bezoar Ibex still exist. They live in the Zagros and Taurus mountain ranges, in Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and scattered populations on Aegean islands. They look almost exactly like a large, wild version of a domestic goat. The same general body shape, similar horns, similar behavior. Watch one in the wild and you are seeing in rough outline what a goat looked like before humans decided it would make a good neighbor. The Bezoar is currently listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List, with populations declining due to hunting, habitat loss, and competition from livestock. The animal that gave rise to one of humanity's most important domesticated species is now at risk from the very domesticated animals it produced. It is one of the stranger ironies in conservation history. Number 1. The Changthangi, the goat that produces fiber, worth more per kilogram than platinum. At 14,000 feet above sea level, on the Changthangi Plateau of Ladakh and Tibet, there is a goat that produces the finest natural fiber on Earth. Most people have never heard of it. Every winter, to survive temperatures that drop to -40 degrees, the Changthangi grows a secondary undercoat so fine it has no real comparison in the animal kingdom. The outer fibers of this undercoat, called pashmina, measure between 12 and 15 microns in diameter. Human hair averages 70 microns. Standard cashmere runs 16 to 19 microns. The finest pashmina grades fall under 12 microns, so delicate that a finished shawl can be threaded through a wedding ring. This is where that phrase comes from. Each Changthangi produces between 100 and 200 grams of pashmina per year, hand-combed during the spring molt, never sheared. The finest grade sells for over $3,000 per kilogram. Platinum currently trades around $30,000 per kilogram. The finest pashmina sits between platinum and gold by weight value, produced by a small mountain goat maintained almost entirely by nomadic Changpa herders who have practiced this craft for centuries. A single authentic pashmina shawl from the finest fiber takes a master weaver in Kashmir up to 72 hours to finish. The cloth weighs almost nothing. It folds small enough to fit in a closed fist. It has been called the soft gold of the Himalayas, and the animal that produces it lives one of the hardest lives of any domestic goat, on a treeless, oxygen-thin plateau, in cold that would kill most breeds in a week. That is number 1. Which entry surprised you most? Drop a comment below. We read every single one.